It's 5 minutes past 6, so we are going to get going. Everybody settles down. Excellent. All righty. My name is Dave Brooks. I write for the Concord Monitor, the Granite Geek blog, and I have been moderating Science Cafes for 8.5 years. I think this is my 68th. I'm not quite sure. I sort of lost track of the first year. Anyway, so, and of course, we also have them in Nashville. So how many people have never been to a Science Cafe before? Raise your hand. Excellent. All right. Well, let me give you my spiel then. So Science Cafe was started in 2011 by a couple of science fans in New Hampshire. Dan Marchek is a computer guy down in Brookline, and Sarah Eck, who got her PhD in I always forget, some biology thing with at Dartmouth. And they both were familiar with the idea of science cafes. They're very common in Europe, and they thought it'd be cool to have one in New Hampshire, sort of ran into each other, decided to start it, asked me to sort of help. At the time I worked for the Nashua Telegraph. We actually started here in Concord, we went down to Nashua, then I came to the Monitor 4 years ago, and so we now have 2 of them. And the one in Nashua is still going strong, and this one has been going, this is its 3rd year. The idea is very simple. We choose a topic. So, and this is actually unusual. Most science cafes you'll find are basically a professor comes and talks about his research. That's what an awful lot of them are, which is fine, but this one goes the other way around. Instead of starting with a person, we start with a topic. Choose a topic, find incredibly intelligent, handsome people who come and talk about it for free, and it's all driven by questions. So if you've never been here before, you may not know, this is not a presentation or a lecture. Our motto is no politics, no PowerPoint. So if you don't ask questions, it gets really boring. So, let me think, there's always something else I want to say. The Nashua, their next one is actually, well actually you can check it on the website, sciencecafenh.org. And you can actually sign up for the email letter there as well, email notification, so they'll let you know. The next one is about basically the equivalent of mad cow disease for humans. I forget what it's called exactly. So, which obviously might be happening right in front of you. So we don't need to worry about that. I don't worry about that. Okay, so tip the waitress. Well, I do say tip the waitress, but then we went to the that, and now we do have a waitress. So we didn't have a waitress last time anyway. So whatever. Yeah, tip your waitress. Obviously, this is actually that's not true. This is a real pain in the neck of a venue for wait staff because everybody comes in at the same time and leaves at the same time. So give them money. I believe that's it. Here's what's going to do. I used to introduce the panel, but that really is pointless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each one of the panelists to spend 2 or 3 minutes telling us who they are and why we should pay any attention to them. And then I will ask the very first question and to get the conversation started. But after that, it's up to you guys to ask questions about electric cars, electric car infrastructure, and oh, I know one other thing. ConcordTV films this, if you aren't aware. You see the camera, and there's one over there. This will be on the cable access channel, and they also put it on their website. And this is shared with other cable access TV stations around the country. And I'm told the folks at ConcordTV love this. They say this is, all the other stations really like it. So if you go to other places you might be recognized in the street, we're very, very popular in Salt Lake City for some reason. Okay, so why don't you start, or you tell us who you are, why we should pay attention to you, and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'm not sure you should pay attention to me. No. Hey everyone, my name is Chris and I work with ChargePoint. My primary job at ChargePoint, the largest electric vehicle charging company in the United States, is to help lead North American business development and infrastructure deployment for DC fast charging. I've been doing that for about 2 years now. Before that, I spent 3 years at Tesla, leading the Northeast in New York in solar and battery storage solutions for residential applications. And I guess on my personal resume, I probably shouldn't admit to this, but I've owned 5 electric vehicles in the past 5 years and have driven about 200,000 miles on those cars. And I guess interesting fact, had a baby 4 months ago.
Congratulations. My name is Kevin Bowen. I work for Eversource. I'm on the Clean Energy Strategy Development team. That team at Eversource works on everything from offshore wind to microgrids to battery storage, and I have the pleasure of managing the company's electric vehicle initiatives and policy development. Been with the company for 2 years, so prior to that, I was at Praxair, the industrial gases company, working primarily on their hydrogen fueling program. So kind of analogous. So happy to be here and happy to answer any questions you have about EVs in general, EV infrastructure, and Eversource's role.
Hi everyone, my name is Brianna Brand and I'm the Senior Program Director with Clean Energy New Hampshire. That is a statewide nonprofit that focuses on clean energy advocacy and technology in education. As part of that, I run a group called Drive Electric New Hampshire. That's an initiative we have that is focusing on promoting EVs and charging infrastructure across the state. That's composed of stakeholders representing auto dealers, utilities, state agencies, private owners, and really anyone that has an interest in seeing this technology move forward. So that is my expertise on electric vehicles. I don't currently drive an electric car, but it's the next one I'm going to buy, so I'm excited for that in the future.
Thanks, Brianna. Hi, my name is Pete King. I guess I'm here because I'm David's neighbor, and our kids went to kindergarten together. But no, other than that, I work as an environmental engineer. I work mostly on applying technology to clean up soil and groundwater. But I have a personal passion to make this world a little bit better, do a little less damage, I should say, than one would normally do. So many years ago, I said to myself, every time I get a new car, it's got to be a more environmentally friendly than the last one. And when my Mini Cooper was going to retire, I thought about hybrid, and I just went all electric. So I've been driving an all-electric car for 3.5 years now. I love doing it, and I love promoting it. And as part of that, I stepped forward when the Senate, the New Hampshire Senate, formed a commission to evaluate EV infrastructure in the state. I threw my hat in the ring and was selected for that. So I'm one of about a dozen members who meet once a month to talk about how to boost infrastructure for electric vehicles in the state. So that's who I am.
What do you drive?
And
I drive the BMW i3. Neat little car.
kind of funky looking.
My son says it's stupid looking, but that's okay. Why can't you get a normal looking car? But they didn't like the Mini Cooper either. They had comments about that one. So whatever. I'm not ashamed of it. I would like to say though, so today, my car gets 80 miles of mileage on a charge. And I will tell anyone that you can live with that for a couple of reasons. A lot of people come to me and say, how can you live with a car that gets 80 miles? I go to Maine once a summer, and it's like, do you take all your cars? How many cars sit in your driveway? So that's reason number one, is there's always a car in the household that's gonna drive less than 80 miles. And if it's not me, I'll swap with my wife, or I'll take my kids' cars. They love driving the BMW if they can for the day. But today was a little different. I did take the car today, and I drove from Mount Vernon to Concord to Bedford to Manchester, back to Bedford to here, and I got to go home, and that's 123 miles. So how do I do that? Well, I don't have workplace charging, so there's a couple of things I do. If anyone passed me going 55 in the 55 mile zone, I'm driving 55 because I can get way more mileage than the 80 miles it says, especially a day like today. I also, to go to Concord, I go back roads, I probably, the way you go, yeah.
Route 13,
Past-
Scannaquag River. Yeah.
Past the guy with the dog and the bike, right? You know what I'm talking
I
about.
wrote a story.
I know you did. But anyways, so the back roads, I get way better miles. So I probably got about 100 miles on a charge by just going back roads, going a little bit slower. But I stopped at my favorite place in the world. I'm going to give a plug for the Whole Foods in Bedford that has a free high-speed charger. So I spent 10, 15 minutes there, got another 25 miles of charge today before I came up here. So that's how to do it. And to be honest, someplace like Whole Foods, I run in, grab a slice of pizza, or I'll sit in the parking lot and do my email. I'll do that. You'll see me behind a car dealer someday doing phone calls and email while I'm plugged in, getting their free Wi-Fi and their free charge. So for someone that says I can't live, I can't go EV, I tell them, no, you can. But so that was a long-winded answer. I
That
don't know
was
how I
pretty
got off on
long,
that.
that's okay, that's all right.
I have a
So-
passion for this, by the way.
I'm gonna, calm down. I'm actually gonna I was gonna ask you the first question anyway, which was to continue talking about the Senate committee, and which is sort of the impetus for having, so this is the third time we've done a session on electric cars, first time we've ever done a subject 3 times. And the first time was 8 years ago, I think, and the subject, and the discussion was basically, how do you run a car on electricity? That's ridiculous. And the next one, several years later, was, ooh, aren't Teslas cool? Let's talk about Teslas, which is fine. But this one, I think we sort of moved beyond that to talk about how do you make it work overall. And obviously, the Senate committee and the Volkswagen money is kind of what prodded it. So could you talk a little bit, just give us context to what that all is, and obviously, anybody feel
Yeah,
free to jump
we'll
in.
jump in. So, has everyone heard of the VW settlement, and has anyone not heard about it? Yeah, there's a few. So, Volkswagen, when selling their diesel cars, and I hope we get this right, if not, you guys can jump on me, because I'm making it up. But, so Volkswagen made these great diesel engines that got tremendous mileage and didn't pollute, and everything was great about them, till a university, I think in North Carolina or someone, or they basically tried to check and found out these results aren't making sense, because when you get that much power out of a diesel, it pollutes a lot more than they're telling us it did. So they actually found that the engineers at Volkswagen put software in so that when the car was in a test scenario, it ran very clean, and when it was out on the highway, it ran dirty as heck, but it ran, it was a great little engine. So they got caught doing that. And as a result, and they were caught dead to right on. There was no if, thens, or buts. They monkeyed with the data and monkeyed with the computer software to make it simulate good data. And so they ended up, a couple of things. They ended up buying back most of, or all of the cars that were affected, which I think they're still sitting in the back of lots, unsold for 3 or 4 years now. But they also settled with the federal government that then distributed money to the states to basically help clean air, because that's what it was all about. It was a clean air. I don't remember the total amount in New Hampshire, but I know the portion that went for EV infrastructure is relatively small, but it's $4.9 million. There were much larger buckets of money that went for clean trucks and clean school buses and electric school buses and things like that. But the piece we're going to talk about today is the electric vehicle infrastructure. So this came about, the Senate passed a bill, SB 517, or 519, 517, that formed this commission, and the commission has got about a dozen members. The utilities are members, Drive Electric is a member, is ChargePoint a member, or? Yeah, you guys are. There's some senators.
Association?
What's that?
Business and
So
Industry.
I'm a rep, I'm also, through my job as a consultant, I'm a member of the New Hampshire Business and Industry Association, so I am their rep on the committee. I'm representing the interests of businesses. And from that perspective, EVs are good for businesses because this, particularly in this state, tourism is such a huge thing. If you can bring people into the state because they have EVs and they want to visit and they want to spend money, then it's a great thing for the state. So the committee has been meeting for about a year. We took the summer off. We're going to get started up again. And we started basically at the bottom, looking at what are the needs? What kind of infrastructure do we have out there, and what do we need? And how is it best, what would be the best way to use the money from this settlement going forward? I guess that's basically the introduction. I could go all day, but we've got other people here to talk, so.
You gotta give up the microphone sometime, Pete, come on.
But just a point of clarification, that it's $31 million that is New Hampshire's portion of the settlement, and to the state's credit, they had the option of to go all the way up to 15% of that to be put towards electric vehicle infrastructure. And to the state's credit, it chose to do all 15%, which is about $4.6 million.
So if you want to watch a documentary about this, there's a Netflix documentary called Dirty Money, and it's episode number 1, and it's all about the Dieselgate scandal. I strongly suggest that you get a chance to watch it. If you're not emotional about it today, you will be after you watch it. It was pretty bad. But after I watched this documentary, just a quick funny story, the cars that have the defeat devices in them, they say TDI on the back. Volkswagen cars or Audi cars. So naturally, when I found out that people could be reimbursed for these vehicles and then potentially get a significantly discounted new vehicle, started seeing them on the highway, and a couple of times I actually followed a couple of people to their houses to ask them why they haven't given this car up yet when they could get a brand new one for free. And turns out that's not a good idea. So stop doing that after a couple of times. Hopefully everyone ends up getting their new car. Just getting into the infrastructure costs on the DC fast charging side. And before I get into that, it's really interesting what you're talking about, how you got 123 miles on a car that gets 80 miles of range. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to a certain portion of the population. It probably makes sense that we're both on the opposite sides of the table.
Okay.
Because
you passed me on the way out.
Because I come from a very conservative family who they don't want anything to change, and electric vehicles are certainly a change. And so many times when we go to these infrastructure meetings or meetings with people that are interested in electric vehicle charging, I always ask how many people own an electric vehicle, and it's usually like 50% of the room. And that 50% is 100% of early adopters. And early adopters have a different mindset than people who are looking to buy in a different market. So whenever I talk about electric vehicle charging, on my end, I don't always try and come from the point of view of it's possible, you can do it. I always try to come from the point of view of it's better, safer, cleaner, funner, and more cost-effective long-term. So that's just, it's interesting because they're both important points of view.
Right.
They're just talking different groups. And then the last thing is, there's such a difference between level 2 charging and DC fast charging and the ability to be able to install infrastructure. I always tell people, when you see a fast charger around...
Actually, can you very briefly talk about the three levels?
Yeah. So level 1 is like a standard wall outlet inside of your house. In 2019, it works for me. I use the Tesla wall outlet that exists, that they give you with the car. I get about 5 miles of range every hour, so it's 60 miles overnight, and that works really well. But not every application can use a level 1 charger. In fact, most can't, or shouldn't, or it's not the right application. Level 2 gets about 20 to 25 miles of range every hour. And think about that application like workplace or also charging at your home. But the idea is you're charging while life happens. And a lot of times people they'll see a level 2 charger and think it's a faster charger and think that it's not a good charger. It just might not be the right application for where you were looking to charge. So that happens sometimes. And then there's a third application, which is more like the gas station application, which is It's called DC fast charging. Sometimes it's referred to as level 3. It's probably obnoxious to everyone in the room how many names there are, but it's fast charging. And so it starts typically, some people say 25 kilowatts is a fast charge. I don't really consider that a fast charge. 50 kilowatts will get you about 200 miles of range every hour. And Tesla just announced their new version 3 supercharger where you can charge 1,000 miles in an hour. So that's coming out, and same thing with ChargePoint. We have a product that can charge cars much faster than they can handle today, and the industry might not even ever get there. But a 500 kilowatt charger that could go up to 2,000 miles an hour. You'll probably see that in more like heavy duty fleet. But going back to level 2 versus level 3, it's really application dependent on where you're going to put these stations, and you want to make sure that you pick the correct application because it will affect how much money you're spending on day one and the experience that the driver is going to have. So on the DC side, the need for infrastructure funding in 2019 is a really big deal. And if you look at fast chargers in New England, you can go on to PlugShare or ChargePoint and just toggle and look at all the fast chargers. One thing you always want to ask yourself is, why was this station placed in the ground and how did it happen? Because it probably wasn't completely organically, just due to the costs in 2019. As utilization comes, as the industry progresses and costs get lower, that will change, but it's just an element of DC fast charging across the United States today.
And right now, how much does it cost to set up a DC fast charger as compared to a level 2 charger?
Level 2 chargers, it varies. There's many different types of chargers, so you can get a level 2 charger for as low as $600 and as high as $12,000. Just the hardware from $600 to $7,000 is about the price. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. For fast charging, to install 2 stations, and that's really what's recommended, is to always be redundant and start off with 2, do make it ready in the future. You're looking at somewhere between $180,000 and $300,000 for 2 stations.
Okay, great. All right. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
So I often tend to get the question, why haven't we seen any of the Volkswagen settlement money yet? So I just want to touch upon. Closer. I just want to touch upon that. So going back a little bit, so the Volkswagen money, when it was distributed to the states, it was distributed according to how many vehicles were affected in each state. So states with higher population, higher adoption of those cars received more money than New Hampshire did, but we always take free money here when we can get it. So not complaining about what we have to work with here. As Kevin said, we did allocate the full 15% of what we could allocate towards electric cars, and Governor Sununu made that decision, and we were very happy that he chose to do that. Some of that money, some of just the generic Volkswagen money that's not dedicated to EVs has actually been spent. It was a little bit that was put towards the Diesel Emission Reduction Act funds, so it shored up that program a little bit. From what I understand, that was just focusing on replacing dirtier diesel with slightly cleaner diesel, so we don't have to talk about that, but just wanted to say a little bit of that has been spent. It just hasn't been spent on the EV infrastructure yet. Let's see, what else? So back to the EVs, we get this question very often of why we haven't seen any charging stations going yet with the money. I get that question very frequently, especially from communities that are wanting a rebate program to do level 2 charging stations, which aren't necessarily as expensive, so they could stand a better chance at maybe putting one in a downtown area, or helping out with some workplace charging. There's definitely a concern throughout the state that I've heard of just that accelerating change in this technology, and just how fast these new charging stations are coming out and these new cars are coming out. And I think there's a real hesitancy to spend money on a product that we could buy now versus waiting a little bit and getting something slightly better, so that we're not already buying something that's obsolete. So I've heard that argument several times from different entities, including those that are responsible for managing the fund. And then I do just want to add to a provision of that settlement is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you may know, if we spend a certain percentage of that fund before, I think it's 7 years, then we actually are put into a pool where we could access some extra money So if some states don't spend as much, some of that money can actually be taken away, put into this pool, and then those states that have exerted more of their funds can actually get a little more. So that's exciting too, back to the old New Hampshire, we love free money.
Excellent.
I guess one thing I can talk about is, so the Infrastructure Commission has been meeting monthly for about a year, and we started out basically on a very basic level. What are EVs and how popular are they, and where are they gonna, where is it gonna go, but one of the real questions we had to look at is how to spend the money and what to spend it on. And it became very clear to this group there's two models out there for putting charging stations in. There's corridor charging, and I'll explain these: corridor charging and destination charging. For my own use, I like destination charging. And what that means is I can go someplace, plug my car in, and do something there for a couple of hours, for a day or whatever. And a couple of examples I'll use. Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a very EV-friendly city. They have chargers all over the downtown in the parking areas. So I can go to Portsmouth, go to a meeting, go to a restaurant. I can charge in a parking lot on a level 2 charger. Level 2 charger for my car will give it a full charge in 4 hours. Would that work on the side of Route 93 at a rest area? Am I going to sit in the rest area for 4 hours? Absolutely not. So level 2 charging does not work ideally as a corridor charging. Corridor charging is sort of the opposite. You're charging on the way, maybe analogous to what a gas station is like today, where and we see the charging stations at the rest area in Hooksett. And I do have to point out, we do have to talk about the difference between Tesla and other universal chargers. My car will not charge at a Tesla station, which the high-speed ones on the at the Hooksett rest area, I can't use those. Teslas can use any stations. So the money that one of the decisions that was made, whether it was New Hampshire or just one of the strings attached to the fund, is it has to benefit all. So it has to go towards universal charging. They can't put in proprietary systems that will only go for a certain vehicle. So we did look at the two methods and where should the money be spent. And really, I think the key thing that came down to was, and the numbers we threw around was $2,000 to $4,000 to put in a small level 2 charger versus $100,000 to $300,000 to put in a high voltage DC charger. Where do you spend the money? And it seemed to make sense that businesses or even communities should be able to come up with a substantial, either all the money or a substantial portion to put in a $2,000 charger at your library. Could your library put in a $300,000 high voltage DC? No. So, and it's never going to happen. So the Volkswagen money is primarily going to be used, at least initially, putting in high voltage DC at a number of, I guess we call them nodes throughout the state, where the state has, or the commission, in conjunction with Department of Transportation, and I forgot to mention DOT, Department of Transportation, and Department of Safety are also members of this Infrastructure Commission. They came up with a series of maps basically showing the north-south roads across the state and kind of drew circles as to these are ideally where we would put high voltage chargers, so that you could leap from one station to the next. And like I said, if there were high voltage chargers, I could literally sit for 20 minutes I could spend 20 minutes at a rest area, but I don't want to spend 4 hours. But with that model, you can make it to Canada. And I actually, today, so one of the benefits of owning an electric vehicle, every time I plug in somewhere, someone comes up and talks to me. And today in the Whole Foods, as I was coming in the parking lot, and I saw that the 2 charging stations were full, a gentleman says, "Are you waiting for the space?" I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm done. I'm going to pull out now. I'll save the space." And I pulled in. And then I hate to say he accosted me, but kind of like your method of coming up. So I spent like 20 minutes in the parking lot talking to this guy. But he told me he's got a BMW i3 with an 80-mile range, and he and his wife just did a cross-Canada trip in this car. He said that Canada, every place has high voltage charging. So, yep, we've got some yeps in the...
Just came back from Quebec, and I've got a Leaf, so I can go from here into Vermont and then up to Stansted. And we went to Drummondville, and then we could go all the way to Quebec. But you're sitting for 45 minutes or so to get up to a decent, I've got an alleged 150-mile range, and it'll take 45, 60 minutes to get it up, because the fuller it gets, the slower it gets. But they're all over the place up there.
Okay, all right. You want to say anything? We go to questions here? I got.
I need to say a couple things. So the really interesting thing about Quebec is 100,000 electric vehicles by 2020. They're like California Junior. They have low electric rates. They have a rebate, I believe, where Tesla just lowered their price to get their car into that rebate, which is I think $5,000 a car. So Quebec is California Junior.
And we have a lot of Quebec visitors coming down, so we want to have electric chargers here. Somebody had a hand over here. There's just one of me tonight, so.
I just had a question. I'm utterly new to this, and I was wondering, as you're talking about going into the charging stations, how often are they full, and what do you do when they're full? And do you sit around and wait? I mean, at least gas stations is never that much of a problem. And as these get to be more popular, are there really going to be enough charging stations everywhere so people aren't rather desperately searching and starting to fight over them or something?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's really interesting because when entities are first looking into getting charging, the first question is how can I get a port and how cheap can I get it for? And that can work in an early market, but once you have locations that have utilization issues in a good way, then you have to figure out how you can solve that problem. And it's on the level 2 and on the DC side. So Tesla, anytime that a car is fully charged, if all 8 of the stations at that location, they usually have 8, if half of the stations, so 4 of the 8, if they're being used, then there's an idle fee associated with keeping your car plugged in and not removing it. Same thing with our company. We have mechanisms actually on our app so that if 2 stations are being used at a location, you can actually get on a wait list, and then there will be a notification sent to the people that are charging stating, hey, somebody's waiting behind you, it would be good if you left. And we also can charge an idle fee as well. So that's on the DC side. On the level 2 side, it's a challenge in some markets. There's EV road rage in some locations where you have a non-network station. I've seen cars keyed before because a Tesla sat in a level 2 station, the only station in that location, and really because the station was free, because you couldn't charge money for it, there was no way to get that Tesla person to leave. I've seen nasty letters. I got a nasty letter once. So yeah, it's an issue, and the solution is software management and being able to incentivize driver behavior through software management of stations.
Okay, who had the next question? How about start with you?
Yeah, I just
Wait,
got a little bit.
Actually, I forgot to say, wait for the microphone so that the TV can pick up what you ask, and when you are talking, put the microphone closer to your mouth than you think you should.
I just got a little lost as I believe as Peter
Yeah.
was speaking about the money that New Hampshire is going to be spending. Is it all going to be on the level 3 chargers? I just got a little confused.
Sure. So what the commission proposed was about $2 million to start. So there's $4.6 million available. So that's less than 50%. And the commission proposed initially starting with a travel corridor solution. So, from my perspective, it's not an either or. It's just a sequencing and prioritization issue. Right. So in order, Peter's coming from a place of an early adopter who knows how to drive, right? His EV.
I know how to play the system.
Right. To encourage adoption, you really need these DC fast chargers because people are making a decision about a brand new technology that they're unfamiliar with, and if they think they can't get to where they're going to go because there's no safety net, there's no fast charger on that corridor, they're going to be less incentive to make that change. So that's why a lot of these funds, these VW funds in different states and New Hampshire, prioritizing the DC fast chargers.
So the first 2 million.
And these,
Approximately, it's not decided completely yet. It's up to the state to really make a final determination.
and the idea is to sprinkle them along I-93, I-95, Spalding Turnpike, the obvious.
And particularly hitting, the North Country and things like that have no infrastructure right now.
And no east-west roads, because this is New Hampshire, and there
They're
aren't
not
any
going
east-west roads. That's right, exactly. I'll go here, and I'll just move this way. Was there somebody here who, you have a question?
I'd like to elaborate on this theme. I've wanted an electric car since many of these people saw the Jetsons on the telly. And the dream has been right out here like a carrot and grabbed away from us with electric cars that were put out on the market, leased, and then withdrawn, undependable, and so forth. I need a car that is dependable and robust, irrespective of the weather. No matter what, if it's stuck in snow, okay? I don't get to spend all day at the library.
Yes.
Some of us actually work for a living and need to be able to get there no matter what. So we need something that is dependable, robust, okay? And so you have a bit of a job to do. I believe in what you're saying. You've got to sell this to these people that you have a product that meets their needs on a day-to-day basis with what they have to deal with.
That's right.
So that's a great point. And I will say, I'm with you. I'm a driver that drives a lot. I live on the seacoast. I work in Concord. My fiance's in Bangor, Maine. I'm driving a lot. So for me right now, it just hasn't made sense to go all electric. It's definitely something I want to do in the future. But I can touch a little bit upon how the market has grown and how the ranges have grown and how the cars, we're seeing so many more come out. Nearly every major auto manufacturer has come out with at least a plug-in hybrid. Most are coming out with all electric. Volvo has declared that they are going to be transitioning to all electric cars in a few years, actually, not that distant of a timeline.
They're coming out with one at the end of the year.
End of the year. So there are at least 59 different models of electric vehicles out there. They range from small cars, they're getting bigger, because especially as they are moving into markets like ours, they're recognizing people want four-wheel drive, they want a heavier vehicle, they want something they can feel off the ground, something they can take skiing and know that it's going to make it over and through the snow. So we're really starting to see more and more action and more new designs and new technologies with those vehicles. The ranges are increasing, they're getting much more reliable, and it's really exciting. From an auto dealer standpoint too, which we haven't talked about as much yet, New Hampshire auto dealers are really excited about this. They're new cars that they can showcase. A lot of them are putting in charging stations at the dealership. So if you buy a car from them, they want you to come back and you can charge there. So I just wanted to touch upon that as well. It's an industry that really is gaining strength here.
And just a couple of quick comments. So of the 200,000 miles I drove, most of it was when I was living in Boston and working in Burlington, Vermont, and I'd commute there 3 times a week in an electric vehicle. And I'll tell you, it was awesome. It was such a great experience, and I won't sell electric vehicles too much except to say this one thing. Once you have a charger in your garage and you don't have to go to a gas station in the wintertime in New England, game, set, match.
And I've heard there's a particular selling point with female drivers, for whatever reason, they really don't like going to gas stations. And the idea of never having to go to a gas station again, which is not unreasonable. is a big selling point once it sort of sinks in.
What was also really helpful was autonomy for the past 2 years. I know that is
We
always an interesting.
won't go into autonomy, it's a different science, Kevin.
All right.
I just have a couple of things. So the question back there about what do you do when the charging stations are full? Well, one thing I want to point out, I've been driving the I3 for 3.5 years now. And there's all kinds of apps. I have 3 of them on my phone that tell me where the chargers are. They tell me who used it last and whether it worked or not. And they also tell me if there is anyone at it right now. So it's real time. I can tell when a charger's there. Now it's kind of like a parking space. It may not be there when you get there. But 3 years ago, I never had an issue going to Whole Foods or other places. They were always available. And all of a sudden, in the last 6 months, there's always people at them. The apps I have on my phone, and I know we have EV drivers here, can anyone name more than 2 or 3 EV charging stations that have been added to the state in the last 3 years? There really hasn't been any. So it's been kind of stagnant, and we are definitely getting at a point where the drivers need more infrastructure out there. Because I have to be pretty safe with where I'm going to know I'm going to get a charge and get home. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Or I swap cars. And I do want to say something like Chris pointed out. I don't just drive my EV because I'm a nerd and it's eco-friendly and stuff. I have been told that it's the BMW with the fastest acceleration of any BMW, 0 to 20. I can beat any of them. So it is a fun car to drive.
I got a friend who bought a Bolt, and he would not go back to a combustion engine if you paid him. I'm astonished. He was not at all the guy I thought would do that.
Right, and as far as the reliability, I'll just keep talking on that, sorry. But as far as the reliability, as an engineer, there's not that many moving parts of it. It doesn't have a transmission. It's direct drive to the motor. It doesn't have a water pump. It doesn't have, I mean, there's a host of things it does not have. I worry a little bit about the electronics going because that's the car on this one. The dashboard and the computer on the thing, but other than that, I get it inspected every year. I get tires for it when I need it, and I buy windshield wipers.
All right, question here, and then I'll keep moving this way.
A few weeks ago, I happened to go by the backside of the Hooksett Plaza. All 8 charging stations were full, and there were probably 5 or 6 cars waiting.
Really?
And it was a Friday night, everybody was heading north. But that brought to my attention, there was no place to queue all of the waiting cars up. They were clogging up
Really?
the ingress. So that's a big part of the infrastructure that needs to be incorporated with that, because when you've got 20 cars waiting, that'll take out a lot of parking lot.
I actually, a couple years ago, I did an interview with the guy who owns the Hooksett Tolls, talked about, I was trying to figure out how many times actually the Tesla chargers were used. Things have changed radically since then. And he said, well, the reason Tesla's there is because Tesla paid for it. He wasn't going to pay the money to do it. So he would have loved, he would, and probably still would love to have the other kind of chargers, but he's not going to fork out 300 grand or whatever. So, but you're absolutely correct. And if you look through the history of gasoline engines, this same fight was going on 100 years ago about how should gasoline be distributed? Who gets the, how do you pay for it? Where should it be? How are we going to put this explosive carcinogenic liquid around? So this is not a new fight in any way. So somebody here.
Just want to put a plug in for destination charging. In New Hampshire, we're a tourist industry, and I think it's really interesting that the fast charging is seen as being tourist friendly. If you want to have a tourist friendly place, plug somebody in a downtown area for 2.5 hours for a beer and a movie or whatever it might be. That's your destination charging. That's your tourist opportunity. The fast chargers are great for somebody who's going to move right through New Hampshire. But those of us who have plug-in hybrids, I drive 20 miles a day. I have a car with 20 miles on it, and then it goes to gas. If I could charge at my workplace, I could go another 20 miles in the day and do some of my work miles on electric as well. That's where we're gonna make a real difference.
Right.
Most of us really only put a few miles on a day. And those smaller hybrid cars, they're not as exciting. I really want a full electric. But I'm really happy to get 90 miles to the gallon on my solar charge.
I'm on the Net Zero Committee in Terry, New Hampshire, and I've been on there for 3 years. And as a teacher, I got thrown on there as a volunteer. And what we did was we put 4 charging stations in the parking lot in the town of Terry, and people are coming, and they're eating, and whatever. The next thing is, we're trying to find out other areas, and the schools would be an ideal place, especially if we, pulling the teachers as well.
Yep.
But the issue is, of course, the schools don't want to pay for the connectivity. I mean, you get the grant, but you still have to come up with the money to connect that charging station to the school. And that's where it becomes a little bit of an issue. But we're hoping to get that going in Terry next year or so.
Just to answer a couple of your comments, which are awesome comments, maybe even all 3. So in regards to yours, so the number one reason when I worked at Tesla that people wouldn't buy cars is because they had range anxiety and didn't know where to charge. Naturally, everyone's coming from the gas station lifestyle, so supercharging feels right when you have a gas car. The reality is 85% of the time, people are charging on level 2 stations. My uncle just bought a car, and he was really concerned about the range anxiety and where the nearest supercharger was. I don't know if he's even gone to it yet, because he just charges it at home all the time. But the question is, like, how do you get those people that are living a gas car lifestyle their entire life move towards an electric vehicle and experience this new lifestyle? And sometimes it's with the fast charger. And then to your point about the hook set, that's why they added 6 new chargers on each side, and then came out with a software upgrade in the car, like a cell phone, where all the cars could charge 25 kilowatts faster, so that you can try and create turnover. And then also Tesla put in a thing where they won't allow people to even charge over 80%. Or they'll, at high utilization locations, they'll just force people off the spot at 80%. So just some
6 or 8 cars waiting.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
They gotta wait 4 hours. I mean,
2 years ago, the problem was the exact opposite.
So real quick, when I did the story 2 years ago, it worked out to the equivalent of 1 car at a time per the 16 on both sides. That was it. That was the only charging. I finally got some numbers out of Tesla. So back then, they were empty.
Right. No, I've never seen.
That was a couple years ago.
That Friday night.
So just really quick, I will say, the owner of that rest stop comes to every Senate Bill 517 commission meeting because he's wanting to put in universal chargers. He has them blocked off in that parking lot.
They do.
He wants to do
They
it.
just need the money.
Okay, we've been talking about, how far we can go in a charging station. Well, I want to know how many times can the battery itself be recharged for, and then what happens?
So in terms of exactly how many times it can be charged, I don't know. A battery is not meant to go below 10% and higher than 90%, so there are different thresholds through software integration, so that doesn't happen. And fast charging is not as good as battery as slow charging is. That said, Tesla right now, they claim that their cars that exist today should be able to last 600,000 miles. And the new batteries are coming out with next year, going to last over 1 million miles. They just bought a company called Maxwell, and apparently they have some type of technology where this is possible. And then in addition to that, they're using lithium-ion batteries right now. Solid-state batteries are another type of battery that is, there's a company in Woburn, Massachusetts right now that's leading the way globally and just had a breakthrough on solid-state batteries where they claim that you can get 30 or 40% extra capacity from the same size. That we're not there yet, so we'll find out. But right now, I mean, I've driven for 200,000 miles, and the one car I drove 125,000 miles. The car went from 256 miles of range to 252 of that 150,000. That's pretty good.
A million miles is like 4,000 cycles, so it'd be like fully charging your car every day for 11 years.
And my understanding is, so for example, Toyota Prius batteries have lasted so much longer than they ever planned that they,
Yeah. It's a
all these
non-issue.
plans they made for how to use batteries, they don't need them because they're not being used.
To the
It's
extent
actually-
that our company is working with repurposed Nissan Leaf batteries because the batteries outlasted the cars.
Yeah.
And using that for battery storage at certain locations where demand charges are high.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, you back there, and then we'll keep going this way.
I'm very new to this, and I haven't owned any of these vehicles. Might buy one in the future. It sounds to me like if you're charging at home, the residence bears the economic cost. If you're charging elsewhere, Whole Foods or on a rest stop, you don't pay for it. How long can this model be sustained? How long will EverSource provide electricity for free? At what point? I mean, something. How long can the customer expect to be able to charge on a corridor for free? Is there any planning built into your models to transition to the point where the customer is paying for the energy all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really up to the owner of the charging station to charge what they want based on their needs, what the application is, right? So not all of them are free. Quite a few at this early stage are free, but we have plenty of site hosts in our system across the 3 states that we work in who try to recover the costs. They're obviously paying an electric bill to the site host, the owner of the charging station is paying for the electricity. In some cases, they're giving it away for free to entice people, the demographic they want, to enlarge the size of the basket. So to get you to come into Whole Foods and spend $50 for whatever you're gonna buy there.
Cheese.
$15 worth of things, yeah.
So that's to a lost leader.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think a lot of times when people think about EV charging and costs, they think about it more in line with a gas station, where it's more like coffee. When you work at a certain location, you have coffee and you provide it as an amenity to your employees because you want them to work there and be happy. Most workplaces that we speak with, they're not looking to make any money off, actually almost none. They're not looking to make money off of it. They're looking to retain employees. And then if you have software alignment, there's one company we're working with where they're offering discounts in store so that people go in. We have a case study with one major entity in the United States where they're seeing $1 per minute of charge spent inside the store. So for every minute you spend, there's $1 inside the store, and every minute of level 2 charging is probably like less than 10 cents, but it's probably even less than that. Same thing with our competitors, and again, when I lived in Vermont, used to go to Hooksett, Barrie, Vermont, Applebee's, and Healthy Living, and I'd say the majority of all of my disposable income was spent there working and getting really nice meals. So that's really the incentive. It's more like coffee than it is like a gas station.
And you feel this is sustainable as 20, 30, 50, 80% of the cars on the road are using electricity? Do you think that model is sustainable at these much higher levels?
I'll just say, I think it is, but I also think that the chargers will start, and some of them do charge money. Some of them charge 35 cents a minute for the high-speed charger, but I can get 40 miles of charge for $3.50. That's similar to a gas price. A lot of them, it's $2 a day if you're parking at a parking garage or something, which is reasonable to get 80 miles of range for $2. Some of them, the Bedford Village Inn, I hope nobody's here from there, it's $14 for a charge there. Has anyone ever charged there? $14? Yeah, thank you. Which, they just don't get it. Yeah.
Level 2's more like coffee, fast charging is
That's
more
true.
like gas stations,
Yeah,
yes.
that's true.
Because there's a higher cost associated with the speed of charging.
I know what I was gonna say. So I have a level 2 charger in my garage. It's a 220 volt. I had an outlet put in, and that was half the cost. It was about $400 and about $400 to put the charger in. So I can charge my car at night, and I do every night. It takes about 4 hours to get a full charge. That has added to my electric bill under $30 a month. So $1 a day is what it costs to charge. And one of the issues I understand with trying to charge for the level 2, the cost is so incremental, it's almost like when the price of the tolls on the Mass Pike cost more to collect the tolls than it actually generated revenue. And they say that's one of the issues with the level 2 chargers, and Eversource is not giving the electricity away. Somebody's paying for it, but the cost of the electricity, if Whole Foods charged me, 20 cents to charge, then I'd probably get my pizza down the street,
And one last question, do you foresee a time when there will be a charge on electric vehicles for road maintenance, bridge maintenance, and so forth? Because it
Can I take that one? I want to take that one. I want to take that one. So,
because there's,
all right.
because
There
there's
is.
a gas station. Do you
All right.
foresee a time when that'll occur?
You just asked that question, I'm gonna answer that one, so. Yeah, so I wear a couple of different hats. I work as an environmental engineer, but I'm also the president of the New Hampshire Council of Engineering Companies, ACEC. So we represent all the engineers in New Hampshire, and we do a lot of transportation work. Transportation in the US is funded by the gas tax, which we like to call the road use fee, but you guys call it the gas tax, because that's what it is. The states are seeing drastic declines in the revenue from that, and part of it, a piece of it, is electric cars, but the real reason is fuel efficiency. We all drove cars, well, not all of us, maybe you didn't drive a car, you got 12 miles to the gallon, but most of us did, and maybe not you, but I did. But so cars now probably average 40, 45 miles an hour is not unusual. So the revenue, and the revenue comes in on a per gallon sold, not a per dollar. So the revenues have declined. So I will just on my own soapbox say the method is failing. The gas tax is failing. It's got to be replaced with something else. I drive an electric vehicle. I would gladly pay a surcharge that, and what was, oh, even this thing is talking to me, it doesn't like that, but, yeah. But I think there does need to be a model where we can pay for our infrastructure, whether it's through, there's a couple of models out there. Oregon is trying something called the Vehicle Mile Traveled, the VMT. I think New Hampshire would have a really tough time selling something where the state's going to know where you are and who you're visiting and all that every minute of the day. So I don't think that's going to fly. There was a simple system proposed last year. I think there's going to be a system proposed this year that's similar, and I heard today up in Concord that from someone, a lobbyist, who said this one has legs, it may pass. What it's going to come down to, if you drive a truck, a pickup truck, I forget the numbers, but you're paying $400 in road use fee in gas tax. If you drive an electric vehicle, you're paying $0. So they're gonna make a sliding scale. This is what they proposed last year, where the electric vehicles would pay maybe $140 in road use fee on your registration. A hybrid may pay $70, and the big trucks pay nothing. Now, I don't see that as a penalty. I don't drive an electric vehicle because it's cheaper or save money, although it does. But that's not my reason for doing it. I do want to drive on a good road. I don't want to drive through potholes. And I think it's foolish to say, because we drive an EV, we don't want to be surcharged. And I think that's just short-sighted, but that's my own opinion.
Did you have something you wanted to add to that? You looked like you were, no, it's fine.
No, I was just going to cover, there was a bill this session that did propose that. There were some entities that came out in opposition to that bill, not because there was any nervousness over EVs not paying their fair share, but because those entities wanted to make sure that we weren't penalizing early adopters of PET technology. I think it could have been a little difficult maybe a few years ago, even if you were considering buying an EV and someone said, yeah, but you're going to already pay more on your registration and you're paying a higher sticker price. So there was that nervousness over not wanting to penalize folks that were wanting to do the right thing and buy a car that was more environmentally friendly. But yeah, we are expecting that to come back again this year. And like Pete said, I mean, I also want to drive on good roads, and every EV owner that I've talked to has been willing to contribute their fair share.
All right, question here.
So if you haven't test driven one, just go test drive one and then you'll buy one.
Yes.
We're on our third, we're on a Bolt, which my 16-year-old has occupied, so now I don't get to drive it. Which is fine because it has a lot of crash avoidance stuff for her. But two kind of other, maybe ancillary, but also big picture questions. I think there's going to be an issue with rare earth minerals, or whatever it's called, worldwide for EV adoption. It's going to be a potentially limiting issue of peak minerals that you need. That's one. Two is our Bolt, which is our third electric car, is solar powered because we are net positive in our house. And when I got the panels installed a year and a half ago, I said, shouldn't we get a wall battery, the Tesla Powerwall or something? And the installer said, well, probably in a year or two you can use your car as your backup for your house when there's a blackout. And we haven't done it yet, but that's another, sort of wrinkle to it.
So rare minerals, anybody want to talk about that one?
I'll take the mic. That's above my pay grade. It could be a problem. It's funny, and there's so many things in life that you hear from one side and hear from the other side, and you don't know who's telling the truth. And that's how EVs was for a while for me. The rare earth minerals part is still that for me. I don't know exactly what the situation's going to be. In regards to, do you want to speak to that?
Well, so what I know secondhand is that it's a potential concern, but it's no more of a potential concern than a number of minerals that are used in conventional vehicles. I mean, your catalytic converter uses all sorts of weird stuff. And so it's always a potential if, suddenly Bolivia goes under and lithium gets more expensive. But I don't think it's the bottleneck that it may seem like. It seems like it's bottleneck because it's new, right? Wow, it's a new thing, it must be a problem.
In regards to the other thing you asked, that's my favorite aspect of EV charging that gets me so excited. It's the aspect of Grid 2.0 and being able to have portable battery storage all over the place, where like the Samsung Galaxy X10 that can charge other cell phones right now wirelessly, that you can take a charge and give back a charge whenever it needs to be. I know Nissan has started to work on that, and their cars are capable of doing that today. I'm sure you need some other equipment to be able to do it, but the grid...
Powering the house in a blackout.
Yeah,
Right.
yes. And Tesla, I know, wants to go there. I think eventually the first thing is getting these cars on the road and getting people to purchase them for other reasons, but that's what excites me most about the industry.
Can we talk to,
Sure, so I'd say a year or two is very optimistic, right? Because first you need the automakers to buy into this concept and be convinced themselves that it won't affect the battery negatively, right? Because you're cycling both ways now, and we talked about the newer batteries who can last more than the life of the car, but now we're talking about more cycles and cycles and dual cycles. So that's got to happen. We're all going to put that functionality in. And then there are other issues of how you might get issues that are down the line that we're considering as a utility for planning purposes. But having 10,000 small generators that we don't know where they are all the time, it's a complicated issue that grid modernization, this path we're on, will eventually solve. It's very exciting, but it's more of a 5 to 10 year kind of solution.
Before I get to you, let me actually, hold on a second. Sure. Well, you still got or do you have something else to add to that, or? Okay, I want to stick with Eversource, because I wanted to talk about, or why I was psyched you guys sent somebody here today, was to talk about what effect this will have on the grid. So you hear this occasionally, oh my gosh, all the Teslas in the rich neighborhood are going to plug in at the same time and take out the grid, take out the substation. That was certainly something you used to hear a lot. So how much of a concern is it? How much is it for?
Yeah, so on a macro grid level, not a concern at all, right? So even in the most optimistic EV forecast projections, so if there are, currently in New England, we'll say there's about 55,000 EVs and hybrids on the road. And the most optimistic projection where there's 1 million EVs on the road in the region by 2030, you're talking about adding about 3.5% of the load, which is well within what the system can handle. Not to mention the fact that we're making awesome strides every year, more and more, on energy efficiency and the distribution of solar. So as the load is declining, the addition of all these EVs will barely offset that. So on a overall grid perspective, not a problem. There could be local circuit issues, right? So if 6 people in a cul-de-sac buy a Tesla and all plug them in when they get home at 6 o'clock, it could be bad news for the transformer on that street, right? Solvable problem with different types of solutions. So either a managed charging solution or a rate, well thought out rate solution. We'll say that discourages people from just coming home and plugging it.
So just to add to that, we saw the New Hampshire Electric Co-op start to look at that issue of not knowing who had bought an EV and when they were going to start charging and what their circuits may have to be tweaked a little bit. So one of the reasons they offered their rebate program for electric and plug-ins was so that they could identify which ratepayers were having those cars, so that then they could say, okay, we need to watch that circuit, or so-and-so just bought a car, let's look at that. So there are some ways the utilities are figuring out how can we, make this the most efficient system and keep up to date.
So I want to talk about a project that's kind of thinking outside the box as to how to take the grid to the next level. And I know very little about this other than a conversation I had with Clay Mitchell, who's a professor at UNH who teaches sustainability. So his project that he's given his students, and I believe they're working on a paper for this, is this model where the employer will put in charging for their employees for free. You plug your car in for free, it starts charging the battery. The grid demand at 8 o'clock in the morning when you get to work is low, so the price of electricity, and we're talking the price on the wholesale, the actual price of electricity, not the price that the consumer pays, but the price on a per minute basis in the morning is much cheaper than it is in the afternoon. But as part of this program, you would let your employer know where you're going after, or how many miles you need to drive when you get home. So the goal is, or what happens is in the afternoon when electricity is in peak demand and everyone's running their air conditioning and the price of electricity shoots up because there's not enough being produced, then your car would turn into a battery and your employer would sell electricity back to the grid, leaving you with enough electricity in your car to get you home at night and get back to work the next day. So there's so many variables to that, but it's just an idea of how you can think about how you could use these vehicles as a positive asset to the grid, not as a drain to the grid. And I just thought that was a really interesting model.
2 other very similar, really interesting models. I believe PSEG, it was in California, they have so much solar out there that there are certain times of the day when the sun's pounding and they need to get electricity off the grid. So I believe they developed a partnership with Honda so that people with Honda Clarities would be able to just take that electricity in so that they could get some of the electricity off their grid. Another really interesting one is Concord Power and Light, I think is the name of the light company in Massachusetts.
Not the real Concord, the other.
No.
Exactly. I sat down with them a couple of years ago, and I don't have the details. I wish I did, but what they have is an electric school bus, and they know the exact path of travel for that school bus for the majority of the year. And then the peak part of the year, when the air conditioners are on in the summertime, they plug that school bus in and use it as a battery for the grid. Just another really interesting application.
That's a municipal utility? Yeah, so city-owned, so they can kind of do what they want to some extent.
So a slightly different model is actually in Japan. Japan has gone all in with hydrogen vehicles, which are a form of an electric vehicle. The 517 Commission had somebody from the hydrogen group come in and talk to us, and he actually said that Japan is going all in on hydrogen because of this capability for cars to serve as batteries back to the grid. They were so concerned about what happened with their nuclear plant melting down and future disasters like that, that they liked the idea of having all these distributed vehicles that can plug into the grid if there's an emergency and help get backup power. So just an interesting sort of global example of another.
Great. All right, question over here.
Thank you very much, and thank you, David, for all the writing you do, because I think what you do makes the community a better place.
Thanks, Dan.
I love the idea that that there would be a news bulletin for everybody to plug in to replace electric power in an outage. That'd be a community spirit thing. But the thing that I want to ask about is the American trucking industry. And how does the electric motors and vehicles and batteries, how can it be adopted by the trucking industry, which I'm sure uses billions of gallons of diesel fuel a year and creates these pockets of terrible pollution when they're all gathered together. And it seems like it's a perfect model because drivers can only drive so many hours in a vehicle, and then they stop at destinations for periods of time, and I don't know where are they at? Why is it all on the little guys? Their ability, and that would also, the cost of that would be spread out over many people.
You know anything about trucks? Okay. I just know that.
I wish I had our fleet guy here to talk a little bit more about it, but Tesla came out with their semi-truck, and Anheuser-Busch has pre-ordered a ton. Pepsi, I think Amazon announced 1,000 Rivian trucks this past week.
They wanted a huge car.
Yeah, 100,000?
100,000.
Sorry, yeah.
And those are like panel trucks, they're not the big tractors.
Yeah, so I would just say like two, and I'm sure there are some other things as well, but two important factors I see is these trucks are traveling a long distance, and the cost of a battery was exponentially more expensive years ago than it is now, and it continues to become lower. And so I think in order to build a truck that can go 400 miles on one charge was critical to find something that could go across the country. And they were just too expensive in the past, but the cost of the kilowatt hour battery is getting much lower now. And then the second thing, and sorry, I know this is another science cafe, but the autonomous aspect of a car driving down roads that are completely straight. Brianna and I drove in an autonomous car 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's awesome, and it works really well.
We did
It's
not fall
perfect.
asleep.
We did not fall
Good.
asleep.
Do that.
But that's going to be an important aspect because once you have autonomous cars, the cost of transportation is reduced by 90%, and suddenly transportation for everyone becomes cheaper. So I think that's the first place where you'll see it.
And just so this is going to be my own personal opinion, although I do work on the Eversource strategy team, so we do think about this thing. My own personal opinion is that long haul trucking is going to be the last thing that gets electrified. Okay, it's just an application that's very difficult from a cost perspective and from a charging perspective. And to fill a battery on a Tesla Semi, you're talking about like a 500 kilowatt charger you would need to effectively charge that. So you think about a truck stop with 50 chargers, you're talking about a small city. Basically, the load is the equivalent of a small city just to charge 50 trucks at a truck stop. It's not a super sustainable application, right? So there's lots of awesome medium and heavy duty applications that will be electrified. So school buses and transit buses are kind of the first movers on this, and they're doing it in a big way. The panel trucks, right? So the order from Amazon for 100,000 is super encouraging, and just because they can be skateboarded or platformed on basically the same thing as the Rivian pickup truck, which is so that's replicable, but, and then hub and spoke. So if you're talking about a large truck that comes back to the same place, that's probably the third thing. And then long distance trucking would be the last thing that gets electrified. It's just a very difficult and expensive problem.
Followed by aviation, which will be the very last one.
So actually, I heard about aviation today.
Uh-oh.
So Seattle, the traffic is so bad, and you gotta take the ferry, there's all these pop-up seaplanes that have popped up all over the place. And a lot of them now, someone told me today, he took one that was electric this week, an electric plane.
It's already in production?
Yeah,
I know that.
he said they're using them in Seattle. But
That's crazy.
that's crazy. But as far as buses, I mean, one of the coolest applications is, picture the bus that you take at an airport that takes you to the rental car place. It goes from stop to stop to stop to stop. And they actually have some now where they can charge by just parking over a certain platform in the road, not have to get out and plug it in the 5 minutes they're sitting there, which would normally be idling, they're charging. So that it runs continuously through a charge. And school buses work because 20 hours a day they're idle, 4 hours a day they're 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, 20 hours a day. So it doesn't need a high-speed charger to get that charge into them. So that's why they're so cheap.
Brianna, speaking of school buses, do you know about, I was startled at the Energy Summit to hear about they were trying to get bids for school buses, electric school buses in the state, and nobody even bid. Do you know anything about that, or?
I knew a little bit. So that was a program that would have utilized the Volkswagen settlement funds. It was to help do a pilot program for electric school buses. They released the RFP, I believe, earlier in the summer, and I believe it had about a month that it was open, and they didn't receive any responses. And there are a few reasons that I think for that, and from what I've heard from communities that had expressed interest. The first few that I tried to work with on it, they had technology that wasn't eligible for replacement under the settlement. So either they were on a fuel that the Volkswagen wouldn't replace. They also just weren't aware of it in time in order to get all those things moving. When you're talking about, especially something that's such a new technology, for a community to get all of that together to do an RFP, they just didn't have enough time. And then I think there was a lot of confusion over whether or not charging was included as an expense under that grant or the rebate. And folks were really confused over whether or not they were just getting the bus and had to do the charging on their own, or what the case was there. So we're actually working with OSI and DES on trying to revise that and see if we can get something else out to do that, because it is something that we think should go forward.
Yeah, get the word out, because I hadn't even heard about it. I was
Yeah,
startled. I'm usually hear about that stuff.
So I talked with our school district, and the issue is the school district does not own buses. They put it out to bid on long-term contracts. So they have no control over what buses are provided. So it sort of wasn't an option for them.
Talk about your no-brainer application, though.
Yeah.
That, having these idling next to all your kids pumping out the fields. So, I've got a question, I'll go back over here.
Thank you. Yes, my question is on solar technology. Solar technology is advancing very rapidly. At what point will we be able to use solar technology to drive or to fuel our electric cars?
Not quite yet, but we are working with, in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts CEC put out a grant to a company from MIT who's got something called Energy Router. So today, you will see carports with solar panels. Those solar panels are feeding the energy they produce back to the grid. They're not feeding the charger itself. This new technology that we're helping this company test will be able to take that energy directly from the solar panel and feed the charger when it's necessary, and then when there's not a car charging, it'll be able to put it back to the grid. So it's coming. Companies like this company that we're working with are testing it out. So that's the short answer.
Will it be mounted on the car? I'm thinking.
Are you talking about like the roof of the
in terms
car? So
like-
this,
yeah.
there actually are companies trying that, but just the surface area and the capability of the solar panels themselves, you wouldn't really get enough power to do much.
Solar panels don't produce as much electricity as we laymen like to think they do. And the amount of power that's used to move a 3,000-pound vehicle is a lot.
And you want to be able to drive on a cloudy day. And that's night, so.
I had a Prius the other night.
Air conditioner.
Yeah.
I know nothing about this, but just pie in the sky. I think I saw in Germany, they're building roads
Yes.
that have solar in the roads that can then charge the car.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
France.
Yeah. Oh, it is,
This
okay.
France, and they decided it wasn't working.
It wasn't,
Even,
okay.
even by French standards. Mixed results, yeah, that's a polite response. So, let me see, somebody who hasn't asked a question yet, there's one back there. Excuse me, sneak past.
Sorry, thank you. Just a quick question. Are you seeing any traction with some of the fossil fuel distribution centers in terms of partnering with like an Exxon station or a Shell station? Those guys have got to see the future coming, and if we're pushing EVs, that means that their market's going to get smaller, theoretically, and perhaps practically, that's going to cut into their margins. So are we starting to see like the 7-Elevens and those kind of retailers kind of come on board to the EV distribution or supply point?
Good question.
Yes. When I joined ChargePoint 2 years ago and got into fast charging, nobody was calling me asking how to own and operate fast chargers, but that's the market that's calling in 2019. Chevron is one of our biggest investors in our most recent series funding of $250 million. Shell just acquired an EV charging company called Greenlots. And I think that's the market that understands DC fast ownership first.
Have you had any response at the committee hearings from that community, or?
So, sort of. We usually have representatives from the interest group that works for the convenience stores and the petroleum stations. They definitely are monitoring what we're talking about. So I think the answer is yes. They don't know quite how to deal with it yet, or at least a lot of the stations don't. The gentleman who caught me in the parking lot today and told me about his cross-country trip, we talked for a few minutes and he said, well, it pretty much is a gas station model up there with the fast chargers, but he says their gas stations are really nice, and you can go in, you can get a smoothie, and you can get an ice cream, and you can get, food, and it's not just hot dog on a roller thing, he said they have good food, and he says I wasn't, I'd spend 45 minutes in there getting a decent meal before I got back on the road and hit the road, and he said those are gas stations. They have one side is gas and the other side's electric now. So it's the model's changing.
Yeah, I don't want to spend 45 minutes in a 7-Eleven.
No. So I have one little side thing that it has to do with something that the Infrastructure Commission did, and this is the audience poll participation part. I hope you don't mind, David. But so I got a poll, but I'm going to do it in two ways. First, I'm going to ask the only people who own or drive EVs to answer the poll, then I'll ask the rest of you. So one of the things that we talked about was putting signage on the highways with a little EV and an arrow showing where chargers were. And so the question to the EV owners, is that a good idea? Do you like that? And I want to see, first of all, who's an EV owner? Raise your hand first. If you think it's a good idea, leave your hand up. If you think it's stupid, take your hand down. Okay, a lot of hands came down. So for people that don't own an EV, do you think it'd be a good idea to put signs on the highway showing where EV chargers are? Yeah, so everyone says yes. So they convinced me, so I'm an EV driver. I don't need to know where they are. My car tells me where they are on the dashboard. My phone tells me where they are in 3 different apps. But we agreed that DOT would put these signs up. Why? Because People that don't drive EVs don't understand where the stations are, and it's a reminder to people that haven't bought a car yet, which is kind of the answer to that. Yeah.
Cool.
The cost,
So,
What's that?
the cost of all those signs.
There is probably a cost, yeah. There probably is, but, yeah.
I did a story about a group in Keene 20 years ago looking at EVs. They were one of the very first, and one of the first things they did was develop a logo for electric charging and say they should be stuck all over the place, and that was 25 years ago. I don't know.
So there's a logo, speaking of logo, there's a logo, and do you know what they're doing out in Portsmouth with the,
Destination.
do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Destination Electric is a program run by a campaign called Drive Change Drive Electric, so it's a regional campaign. And it's in 3 cities in New Hampshire, Portsmouth, Dover, and Nashua. And it's a little sticker circular that says Destination Electric Partner. And it's to highlight small businesses that may not necessarily have their own charger, but are in close proximity to, say, a level 2 charger in a downtown area. And it's to help highlight those businesses so EV owners can say, oh, okay, I can go here because I know there's a charging station nearby. So there's a lot of logos at work, let me tell you.
Cool. Somebody over here had their hand up, I forget who it was. They hadn't asked before? No? All right, over here. We do.
More comment than question. Aren't you not supposed to be looking at your phone when you're driving?
Find out where the station is.
You're looking for a charging station when you're driving. You're not supposed to be using your phone when you're driving?
It comes up on the dashboard. There's a
They can do it
computer
on the
screen.
dash, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, well, that's different.
So normally, if I'm going somewhere, I look ahead of time to find out where the stations are.
Well, you're intelligent,
Yeah.
not everybody. It seems to me one of the largest consumers of gasoline and petroleum products in the country is the U.S. Postal Service. And yet I've heard nothing about the Postal Service even going hybrid, much less electric. I don't know whether any of you know anything in that area. And my second comment is, in terms of the road use fee, this is not going to go down well in New Hampshire, but annually you would take the mileage of the car, calculate how many miles that car has driven, and assess a road use fee. You know, right now I'm driving a car that gets, say, 28 miles to a gallon, and I buy X number of gallons, and I pay a road use fee, basically, that the number of gallons of gasoline I burn to go those miles. So it would seem to me, and maybe you could incorporate it into the inspection system. Whenever you have your car inspected, your mileage is registered. This is where the state of New Hampshire is going. People aren't going to like it because you're going to be having your mileage reported.
That's right. You have to do that anyways with your annual registration.
Yeah.
I understand. So they were talking today about a way to tie that together. Yeah.
Just, yeah, U.S. Postal Service, they are looking into electrification.
They are.
They released an RFP.
In this decade?
Yes. Very,
There's only 2 years left.
very recently.
Okay.
Yeah,
FedEx and UPS are.
yeah.
Definitely.
They do have a gazillion vehicles at once, so it is a slow process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to retire what they've got.
If you go to a vehicle, a road utilization fee based on your vehicle registration, how do you capture usage from out-of-state vehicles?
No different than how do you capture if you buy your gas in Massachusetts or you fill up in New Hampshire and go to Maine. There's no perfect system. I think the perfect system would be, which I wouldn't even accept it, would be to track your car, which, honest to God, everyone's doing it anyways. I know BMW knows my car is parked out there right now, and they could tell me where it is tomorrow. But and they know how many miles I drive. I know that. But until we get to a system where that's the way to do it, and you pay per use, or you could toll every place. They're talking about doing that in some places, putting like the invisible tolls, the high-speed tolls you see in the highway. Some states are talking about putting them everywhere. So instead of paying $2 for the toll, you're paying 2 cents for the toll every time you go through a toll. But I don't know how we're going to get there. But My point is the gas tax, as we know it, needs to be changed to something else. And maybe the registration is an interim step, but I think ultimately a vehicle miles taxed is, and Oregon is one of the states, I think there's 3 states that are piloting that right now. So we may get there.
And just in regards to data, has anybody gone on Netflix and seen the documentary called The Great Hack? It's about Cambridge Analytica. Okay, well anyways, you should definitely watch that documentary when you get a chance, but it's all about how and sorry not to get into politics, I'm not going to, but it's just around data, how the past election was won, and the girl that was, her name was Brittany Kaiser, and she was in charge of working this program, and she talked about how Google, Facebook, and these companies, there's no control over data right now.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger issue is they're going to have our data, and if someone's concerned about that, then you're going to have to go solve that, because that's going to happen organically.
It's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
All right, a question back here?
First of all, would you repeat the name of that movie?
Yes, it's called The Great Hack on Netflix. Really good documentary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am an EV owner, and I just have a comment that they're really cell phones on wheels. There's no maintenance and no fan belts, no pumps, no oil leaks, no gas. It's just, there's not all the hardware of that heavy equipment being hauled around in front of your car. It's, until you try it, you can't believe it.
So the other thing I'll say too is brakes.
Yeah.
Have you replaced your brakes?
No.
Because you don't use them. So
Brake dust.
there's no brake dust. But so if you don't own an EV, my car is one pedal driving. It has a brake, but I try never to use it, and I don't have to use it. If I see a stoplight or the lights just change ahead, if I take my foot off the accelerator pedal, and I don't call it a gas pedal anymore, if I take it off really quick, I hit the windshield because it's like slamming on the brakes. So you learn how to ease your foot up a little bit so that you stop by the time you get to the line. So what's happening is we're not using friction to create heat to slow the car down. We're actually turning the motor into a generator and putting that power back into the batteries. So so the dealers have told me they've never changed brakes on an electric vehicle.
And this is exactly why Tesla avoided the dealer model and why car dealers don't really sell EVs very much despite
Because there's no maintenance.
Because they're going to lose, right now, dealers, a large portion of their income is service. And they know that if everybody drives EVs, their service income is going to plummet. So they don't really have an incentive to sell EVs, frankly. So that's been one of the issues. Question, we got a new person over here.
I don't actually have a question.
Wait a minute, wait for your non-question, just like
I don't really have a question, but in terms of what this lady said and what other EV owners have said, I do not own an EV, although I think someone should give me one. I've lived off
There's a
grid for
BMW in the parking lot.
I've lived off grid for 20 years, 40 years next year. But what I want to recommend for anybody who might be thinking about it is this movie called Who Killed the Electric Car?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this? This is a movie about the fact that General Motors, 20 years ago, produced a car called the EV1 in California. There were waiting lists for this car. Everybody loved it. This will give you a walk through a mechanic's office, a mechanic's shop, and I say office because there's not a speck of dirt in this place. It looks like an operating room, it's so clean. But what they eventually did, I can't remember the name of the board, but one of the boards in California determined that the car was not safe, which is questionable. So they started driving around, repossessing these cars and literally crushing them. Car owners were taking them and hiding them to try to keep them from being repossessed, but eventually that experiment died. And I just would like to express my intense frustration that this far in the future, we are still discussing this, and that at this point, we just let it go. That's all.
Question back here?
Who killed the electric car is part of the reason why I didn't lease, but I bought my car. Can't take it away. I wanted to ask, what's the status for towns and businesses applying for the Volkswagen money for charging stations? I know I've read things about what the percentages might be and what the cost share might be, but I haven't found an application yet. I'm on the energy committee in my town.
Yeah, so essentially the commission so far has come up with the first $200,000 will go, $2 million will go to the high speed. There has been no decision on when it's gonna go to the lower tier. There's been a lot of interest at the commission. We usually get an audience of maybe a dozen or so people, and I can say 4 or 5 of them are from town energy commissions asking about this. The ultimate decision as to when the money is released and how it's released comes from the state through the Office of Strategic Initiatives, OSI, which used to be Office of Energy and Planning. So they really are controlling it. The purse strings, so to speak, are the Department of Environmental Services are also managing it, but they're not making the decisions on where the money gets released. But I'd say at this point, for this year going forward, they're going to be, they were supposed to come out with an RFP this summer, which I haven't seen yet, which, and it would be basically an RFP for partners like Eversource and owners of property, say a rest area or a gas station or a commercial, to apply for these grants. And that's the first round. We've been off for the summer. We'll meet I think next week for the first meeting, and so we'll want to find out how that program is going, but the next step will be to look at what are we doing next. And I do think, you know, I'd love to see every town library, for example, get a grant for $2,000 to put a charger in.
That's exactly what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And just to talk about the demand and the excitement around this in Vermont, and Vermont, I apologize if I don't get this number exactly right, but it's in the ballpark. They were doing grant funding on a quarterly basis with the Volkswagen money, level 2 in DC, and they maximized the amount of funding that can be used per quarter to $400,000. In round 1, they received, I believe, around $1.5 million worth of applications, and in round 2, I think it was around $2 million.
Those crazy Vermonters.
Have you seen any activity from the towns and cities planning groups in changing the zoning to incorporate EV?
I can tell, yeah.
So one of the members of the commission is with the Department of Safety, and they have been working with the towns regarding building codes, because, and this is beyond my ability, whatever, but I understand that some of the building codes would be prohibitive to putting in this type of infrastructure, although it's basically in the can type of project. So they're trying to get around the building codes, or to let the building code accommodate EV chargers, because it's safe and proven technology. The other thing that they're trying to get the word out, and I'm not sure if they're trying to do it through building code or whatever, is to have people aware that they should put in infrastructure now. Put the pipes in the ground before you pave the parking lot. Put the pipes in the ground when you build a new municipal center, because that's, and we talked about it in the commission, it's 80 or 90% of the cost at times is to run the pipes for, you know, if you're putting in a $2,000 charger, it may cost you $8,000 to replace the parking lot to run that conduit, so.
So in regards to zoning, one of the big challenges across the country, this isn't a New Hampshire thing, is you'll go to one city and say, hey, we're installing a charging station, and they say, great, no parking spots are taken away. And you go to the next city, and they consider you installing a station at a parking spot a dumpster. And it's taking away a parking space that is a code enforcement issue. And so we're always trying to educate that these aren't taking up parking spots, they're just making them more versatile. On a second point, Boston is really leading the country in terms of permitting and requirements in the city. So they're requiring that all new construction within city lines are 25% filled with electric vehicle charging stations today. Yeah, so South Boston, there's no issues finding parking right now.
Well, there's an issue finding parking. There's not an issue finding.
Not for us, not for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the best spots.
Yeah, we do.
On the building code issue, people started to look at apartment buildings and parking there, because I think if you live in an apartment building now and you don't have an outlet or the ability to put in a dryer outlet down where your car is, that I think is going to be a problem for electric vehicle owners.
The challenge I've seen trying to speak with condominiums about EV charging is typically one person wants it, but everyone's kind of paying for it, and it creates a little bit of a challenge. That's been the biggest issue for me.
Right, not only putting in a charger, but just the ability to have an outlet near where your car is, so that you can charge yourself.
Yeah, I think the question is, what meter does that go on, and who's paying for it? You know, is that going to your house, or is that going to a common meter, and everyone there is looking at you like you're trying to beat up them?
All right, push it back here. We're getting near the end.
This is for Eversource. When are you going to have net metering so that I can charge my car at night and have to go? Yeah, time of use. Say that again?
Time of use or not?
Time of use.
Yeah, time of use. So it depends on. So you are an Eversource customer? You know?
Yes, I am.
Right. So I think there is a residential rate that's a whole house time of use rate. There are costs associated with doing an EV only time of use rate, right? So you'd have to figure out a way to get to pay for it. That there's a cost associated with a new meter, right, and the infrastructure to do that. But that's not to say it's not possible, right? So you could do that. It's so can you expand a little bit more about your question? I mean, I feel like you're not.
So when I plug in my EV, it's taking 10 kilowatts. So if I can shift that at night, to me, that would be a better use of the infrastructure. But there's no incentive for me to do it right now.
If you're not on a time of use rate.
So I can change my house to time of use rate?
I don't think New Hampshire has it. New Hampshire doesn't have it.
Okay. Sorry.
Connecticut may, I don't know, maybe other states do.
So Connecticut does have.
Okay, New Hampshire does not have residential time of use, correct?
Correct.
Eversource.
For Eversource.
For Eversource, okay. New Hampshire Electric Co-op helped me put the meter in.
New Hampshire Electric Co-op is a co-op and not a regulated utility, so it's able to do weird things.
Yeah, correct. So everything that we do needs to be approved by regulators, and we have to show that it's a good use of ratepayer funds and all that associated stuff. So.
And there'd be, concern that if they give you time of use, somehow it'll increase my rates if I don't use it and that kind of stuff. And
correct.
Ever to get mad. So we only got a couple more minutes. So actually, I want to ask Eversource a question that I've long had. So back in the 20s and 30s, you've seen these old pictures on Main Street, PSNH with its all-electric house, and you could buy an electric stove, and they were peddling that stuff big because they wanted to sell more electricity. Why don't electric utilities, why aren't they all on board with electric cars? This is your future customer. Why aren't you guys out there just like shoving them down our throats? I've never quite understood that.
So, just like the previous answer, everything that we do needs to be approved by our regulators. I know in Massachusetts, when we proposed a program to include marketing and education. It was disallowed by the Massachusetts DPU. They didn't feel it was the utilities' place to be using ratepayer funds to educate ratepayers about electric vehicles. That's the job of the
You have non-regulated arms as well, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely, and we are doing, and it may not appear that way, but we are doing things like, working with Drive Electric New Hampshire, sponsoring the EV rally. We do offer rebates on one specific manufacturer's vehicles.
Yeah, but that's actually Nissan's rebate, not yours, right?
Yeah, absolutely, they're the ones who are paying for it,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it's available to all our customers and our employees. Our website is full of neat information on EVs. We do as many ride and drives as we can. We're spending our own money on that. So we're doing what we can with the limited pool of funds that we have available for that.
Just think of all that Northern Pass money has been spent on pushing electric cars.
And just in support of Eversource in Massachusetts, they have a very successful EV charging program.
Yeah, I want to give Eversource credit. They really hopped on board with our EV relay that we did last week. It was the first event of its type in the world, and Eversource came on board with us and really helped us make it great. So I would actually say they're very behind electric vehicles and have been great to work with.
Okay.
I'll give them a plug too in a different way. So the a plug, oh my God, so the EV Commission, it has a different member who was supposed to be here tonight from Eversource, but Charlotte Angtel has been one of our key members in the commission. And she really spearheaded, we were kind of getting to a point where we weren't getting anywhere with figuring out, 12 people sitting around a table and trying to figure out who's doing what. So she made like a little subgroup of the utilities in New Hampshire, and they basically drafted out a plan that this is how money could be spent. This is, and my understanding is firms like Eversource would spend money or throw in money, and I may be speaking out of turn, to build these high-speed chargers that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And her point was they can only do what is fair to the customers because they are regulated and everything has to be in black and white. But she said this is an area where we have a little bit of fudge, and I'm probably saying things completely wrong, getting her in trouble, but this is an area where Eversource can, maybe they're not going to make their money back on that $300,000 investment, but they recognize it's an investment for the future. So I give the plug to Eversource because she was really key to getting this thing basically out of the starting blocks and into a real plan that OSI, Office of Strategic Initiative, could do. The co-op is already doing a bunch of neat stuff, but I think there's a couple of reasons. One is they are semi-regulated. They get to do what they want because they're a member-owned thing. And the second is they've got a gentleman who's on our committee who is, Gary LeMay, is way into electric vehicles. He's got the solar wall and the power wall and everything else going. And he is just, any program he can put to his customers, he'll do.
So across the country, states are trying to figure out how to spend this Volkswagen money, and it's not easy, especially when electric vehicle charging is new, and many of the folks that are making the decisions haven't experienced an electric vehicle yet. So there's this educational period that's really important for each individual state. What's really cool that's happened in New Hampshire is across the country, states are trying to figure out what to do, and they're having to throw all of their Volkswagen money at some of these projects across the board. But when Eversource came in and said, hey, we're willing to help out on the infrastructure side, it allowed the state to be able to use some of that funds on things in the future, like level 2 charging at home potentially, or in retail, or whatever the case may be. And across the country, everyone's taking notice that the utility here is working with the state agency that's giving out the Volkswagen funding, and it's going to help the entire country, not just New Hampshire.
That's great. All right. Okay, we have about 3 minutes. You haven't asked a question yet, have you? Okay, last question.
Brianna touched on something earlier about
people holding off buying cars, waiting for technology to get better because it's moving quickly. I know Tesla ran into this issue at one point, and they upgraded cars that were already sold with new technology that was coming forward. Do other companies do the same sort of thing? Are they back upgrading cars with the newer technology to existing owners?
Okay.
Hand it out to the Tesla or Tesla.
Yeah, definitely a sensitive question. So the reason I had 5 Teslas is because I've sold 3 of them, because the resale value is so good. And the resale value for other electric vehicles traditionally aren't as good as gas cars. And so Tesla has made this industry what it is. They built incredible cars, next generation vehicles that I think they're the number 3 selling car in Europe right now, number 1 selling car in the United States in terms of revenue. The two of the biggest cars that are traded for it are a Honda Civic and a Toyota Camry, cars that are 3 times less in cost. So in terms of battery technology, they're ahead of the game. In terms of turning a car into a cell phone, they're definitely ahead of the game. And what they were changing was the hardware that was behind the screen wasn't capable for, I think, what's called AP2, full self-driving capability. Now, when I talk to my father about this, he tells me that I'm a lunatic and that self-driving is never going to exist. But I've used it for 2 years. It's awesome, and the car gets better all the time. Not every other car company today, you can buy a car that has that capability today. So I don't think that specific upgrade that you're referencing, that they went back and they fixed it no cost. Tesla has a bigger vision that involves ride sharing that you don't necessarily always hear all the time from other companies. So I think you'll see that in the future. I don't know, I think so. But Tesla definitely has a competitive advantage from that front right now.
Well, Tesla has over-the-air upgrades that not everybody does, right? So.
Yeah, every Tesla gets over-the-air upgrades, but the capacity of those upgrades are a little bit different. So they're coming out with version 10 in the near future. So if you're at the mall, wherever you are, and it's raining outside, the car will come pick you up in front of the mall so that you don't have to get out in the rain. That's where Tesla is right now, and there's really nothing else like it.
No, there's no, I agree. They are in a league of their own, for better or for worse. So, excellent. Well, it's almost 8 o'clock, and I've used up all the time that I'm asking these people to get for free. So, will you give them a round of applause? We will be here next month, the third Wednesday, and the subject next month is going to be linguistics, which is just sort of about the science of language, how it's changing, like how the internet is changing it, and why the word enough is spelled so stupid, things like that. This is, as I said, 68 of them. We've never come close to a topic like that, so I'm pretty excited about it. So, thank you very much. ScienceCafeNH.org if you need to learn more. Thank you.